Hello everyone, welcome to another session of Next ABS Essential Question Series NEET PG 2025. Today we are going to have a discussion on a very important topic, that is abnormal gaits. So starting with the first question without any further delay, a 52-year-old woman presents with a chronic hip pain and difficulty in walking. On examination, when she stands on her right leg, you observe that the left pelvis drops down significantly. So which of the following is the likely abnormality the patient is suffering from? So basically, the question is asked from the topic, that is Trendelenburg test. And this question, for the first time, was asked in 2014 JIPMER examination, and since then, it has been asked multiple of the times. So let us start with the basic pathophysiological mechanism behind. You see, the major muscle is the gluteus medius and gluteus minimus. And both gluteus medius and minimus are basically the abductors of the hip joint. Now, why this abduction is important in order to maintain the basic biomechanics of the hip joint? Whenever the patient tries to stand on one limb, then these abductors they contract, and this contraction of the abductor is responsible for producing the class 3 lever mechanism at the level of the hip joint. Thereby, it is generating the force which is responsible for lifting the other end of the hip upwards. Now, why is it a requirement? That means the other end of the hip has to move up so that the center of the gravity gets deviated towards the weight bearing limb. So that is the reason why this abductor mechanism of the hip joint is important. And you know, the basic abductors are gluteus medius and minimus, and both of them are supplied by the superior gluteal nerve. Now, what happens? Imagine if the patient's gluteus medius and minimus are affected, which could be because of the nerve, which could be because of the paralysis, which could be because of the injury. Now, in case the gluteus medius and minimus are non-functional, then what will happen? There will be a failure of generation of this force by gluteus medius and minimus. So as a result of which, when the force is not generated, there is no force which is transmitted to the other end of the hip joint to elevate it. So there will be no elevation of the other end of the hip. So the other end of the pelvis, it drops down. And this is what the Trendelenburg test positivity is. So this is how you will identify that the Trendelenburg test is positive. Now, two most important things related to this Trendelenburg test generation 1 question. The first one is the side evaluation. You see, if you go back to the question, then there are too much of the left and right which are mentioned in the question, and it tends to confuse you. Remember, for Trendelenburg test, the side on which the patient is bearing weight is the side on test. If the patient is bearing weight on the right side, then the right-sided abductor mechanism of the hip joint is on test. If the patient is bearing weight on the left side, then the left-sided abductor mechanism of the hip joint is on test. And the key components of the abductor mechanism of the hip are the gluteus medius and minimus muscle contraction. In case if you go back to the question, like when she stands on the right leg, that means the right-sided abductor mechanism is on test. You observe that the left hip pelvis drops down significantly. That means when the patient is trying to bear weight on the right lower limb, the gluteus medius and gluteus minimus on the right lower limb are not able to generate adequate force which can be transmitted to the other side of the pelvis in order to move it up. So as a result of which, it drops down. So this is Trendelenburg test positive for the right side. Which of the following is the likely abnormality the patient is suffering from? The patient is suffering from the right-sided gluteus medius or gluteus minimus palsy, and you know both these two muscles are supplied by the superior gluteal nerve. So correct answer for this question is right-sided superior gluteal nerve palsy. So this is how the Trendelenburg related questions are going to be answered. You know, there are second generation, third generation questions also, but we are going to have a discussion on those things when we will be talking about the Trendelenburg as a topic in orthopedics. Now, coming on to the next question. You see, a 40-year-old man is presenting with the high stepping gait to prevent the tripping. Now, which of the following nerve injury is most commonly associated with this presentation? You see, this question has been asked recently, and we are expecting such questions to be asked in future also. That what is the name of the nerve which is likely to be affected? Now, all of us are aware of the fact that what is the normal gait cycle and what are their components. The normal gait cycle, it consists of two components. One is stance phase and the other one is swing phase. Now, stance phase is identified when one limb is on the ground. So it is further divided into three phases. The first one is the heel strike, where the heel is striking the ground. The second one is the mid stance, where the entire range of the foot The entire foot is on the ground. And third one is heel off, which is also known by the name of pre-swing. So this is heel off. These are the three phases of the stance phase. That means one foot on the ground. Now that same foot, when the toes are off, so this is the beginning of the swing phase. Then there is an accelerative phase, which is mid swing. And then there is a deaccelerative phase, which is terminal swing. That means the heel is about to strike down on the ground. This is a complete cycle of the gait from the heel strike all the way up to the terminal swing. Now, let's talk about the basic anatomy behind the heel strike. All of us are aware of the fact that in order for the foot to carry out this function of heel strike, the ankle should be in dorsiflexion, and the major dorsiflexor of the ankle is tibialis anterior. The nerve which is responsible for supplying the tibialis anterior is the common peroneal nerve through T peroneal nerve. So these are the three things which are associated with the basic anatomy of heel strike. In order to perform the first stage of gait cycle, there has to be a dorsiflexion of the ankle. But imagine a situation where the common peroneal nerve is injured. Now this injury will result in the palsy to the tibialis anterior, as a result of which the patient won't be able to dorsiflex the ankle. So there is inability of the dorsiflexion of the ankle, which is known by the name of foot drop. Now imagine such a patient who is not able to bring the ankle into dorsiflexion, is walking with the foot drop. So when he walks on the ground, he has to drag his foot or drag his toes on the ground while walking, because he cannot lift it by performing the heel strike. So there has to be a natural dragging of the toes on the ground. This dragging will result in an injury to the dorsum of the foot. So in order to avoid the injury, he is taking a higher step. So in order to avoid this injury, he is taking a higher step. And this is the reason why it is called by the name of high stepping gait, or also simply sometimes it is also called by the name of steppage gait. And this is a feature of a foot drop which is caused by tibialis anterior palsy, which is the reason of common peroneal nerve injury. So if you go back to the question, a 40-year-old male, high stepping gait to prevent tripping, which of the following nerve injury is most commonly associated? Answer for that question is common peroneal nerve injury. So hope you have understood the answer for this question. Coming on to the next question, that a 6-year-old child spastic diplegic cerebral palsy is undergoing a gait evaluation. Now during the assessment, you observe the child is consistently using one hand to brace or stabilize by resting it on the ipsilateral knee while walking. That means he used to stabilize the knee joint by holding it into extension while performing the stance on that particular limb. So which of the following best describes the reason? And here in this question, the examiner is trying to ask you that what is the name of the muscle which is affected. Now all of us are aware of the fact that during the mid stance, the knee has to be kept in a locked position. And all of us are also aware that quadriceps muscle is a group which is essential for knee extension and stabilizing the knee during the stance phase of the walking. Now they maintain the knee in a locked extended position to support the body weight. That is the role of quadriceps. Now in case if the quadriceps is weak, what will happen? The knee joint may not remain fully extended during weight bearing. So whenever the patient tries to bear weight on the affected limb, there will be a jerky movement forward because of there will be no extension of the knee joint, right? So this leads to instability, as the knee may buckle or collapse under the load, particularly when the limb is in the stance phase. So in order to prevent this, there is a compensatory mechanism which is known by the name of hand to knee gait. Now, to counteract this instability, the patient instinctively uses one hand to brace against the knee. Now, this hand contact, it provides additional support by mechanically stabilizing the knee and reducing the demand of the weakened quadriceps. Also, the tactile feedback from placing the hand on the knee also assists in proprioception, so thereby helping the patient better control the joint position. So this is how the hand to knee gait is identified, and the functional outcome obviously is the use of the hand minimizes the risk of knee buckling during ambulation. Although it helps maintaining the balance and stability, this compensation results in the characteristic hand to knee gait. And you already came to know what is the name of the muscle which is responsible, or what is the name of the muscle which is affected, is the quadriceps. So answer for this question obviously is the quadriceps palsy. Next, coming on to the scissor gait. Now, what are the 3 points which are important to be recognized? Point number one, what are the names of the muscles which are affected? Point number two, what is the condition in which these things are going to be identified? And point number three, that how will you identify it in a given picture? Now, all of you know that scissor gait is an abnormal walking pattern which is most commonly seen in the individuals with a spastic cerebral palsy. That is important. The spastic cerebral palsy, because particularly the spastic diplegia, although it can also occur in other neurological deficit, but this is important for you to remember. Now, point number two, the primary mechanism which is involved in the imbalance is the muscle control around the hip joints. And what are the names of the muscle? It is the spasticity of the hip adductors. The overactivity and increased tone in the hip adduction muscles causes the thigh to get pulled inwards during the gait cycle. Now, this excessive adduction forces the leg to cross over the other in the scissor like manner. So, whenever the patient takes a step forward, there is a crossing over of the other leg in front of the other one. And then the other one, when it has to be brought in front, then there has to be a crossing of the right one in front of the left. So that is why it is known by the name of scissor gait. So what are the points? It is seen in the severe spasticity, such as in case of cerebral palsy, the legs they cross or scissor due to increased tone in the hip adductors. So this is how the scissor gait could be means kept in your question. Next is the extensor lurch gait. Now all of you know that what are the 3 points which are important to be identified under extensor lurch. Point number one, what is the name of the muscle? The name of the muscle is gluteus maximus. Now point number two, that what is the name of the nerve which is affected? As you know that gluteus maximus is supplied by inferior gluteal nerve. There is a significance of the inferior gluteal nerve in this case. And point number three is how to identify this extensor lurch gait. Now normally during the stance phase, the gluteus maximus, which is the major extensor of the hip joint, is responsible for maintaining the extension at the hip in during the mid stance stage. In case if the gluteus maximus is weakened, which could be because of multiple factors, it could be neurological, it could be direct mechanical injury, it could be because of the intramuscular injections. So if there is a weakness of the gluteus maximus, so what will happen that whenever the patient is forced to stand in the mid stance, he will lean forward, right? There will be a flexion of the trunk. Why there will be a flexion of the trunk? Because of the inability of the gluteus maximus to hold him in extension. So in order to compensate this loss, there is an exaggerated lumbar lordosis in a patient, and now he can maintain the vertical stance at the level of the hip joint. So the person is compensating for the loss of the gluteus maximus function of the hip extensors. So how will you identify it? It is characterized by a backward lurch of the trunk, and this gait compensates for the hip or the lower limb weakness, particularly in the extensors of the hip joint because of the exaggerated lumbar lordosis. This is how you will identify the extensor lurch gait. So these are the 3 points related to this one. Next, you already know about the hemiplegic gait, that it is commonly seen after a stroke, and it is a feature of a circumduction of the affected limb with abnormal posturing due to unilateral weakness. So the patient would be having a circumduction limb because the patient is not able to lift it into flexion against the gravity. All those anti-gravity functions are lost. So there has to be a circumduction of the limb in case of hemiplegic gait, which is commonly seen after stroke. Another one is the Parkinsonian gait, which is very, very well you are aware of, that it is characterized by a small shuffling steps, a stooped posture, and difficulty initiating the movement, which is often associated with Parkinson's disease. And then finally is the Trendelenburg gait. We have started the topic with the Trendelenburg test. And in case of Trendelenburg gait, it is all, as we have already talked about, that it is caused by the weakness of the hip abductors, mainly gluteus medius, which lead to drop of the pelvis on the opposite side during the stance phase. So how it is going to affect the gait? Because whenever you bear weight on one limb, the other limb has to move up. But in case of Trendelenburg test, the other limb it also drops down. So the patient seems to be walking like when he bear weight on the right lower limb, the left lower limb moves up. But when he bear weight on the left lower limb, the right lower limb moves down. So this is how the Trendelenburg gait is identified. In case if there is a bilateral weakness of both the lower limbs, when he bear weight on the right lower limb, the left side of the pelvis droops down, and when he bear weight on the left lower limb, the right side of the pelvis also droops down. So the patient appears like a duck-like gait, also known by the name of Rattling gate. So hope the session was helpful as far as the anatomical questions on abnormal gate mechanisms are concerned. All the best for your future examination. In case not to miss any update, please join our Telegram group. The link is provided to you in the description.